Hello, everyone. I'm Bob Leeser with Tulsa Global Alliance. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's discussion on Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. We're very fortunate to have two distinguished representatives of Tulsa's nonprofit community, Emily Curzon and David Grewe, with us, and they traveled to this region in 2019. Tulsa Global Alliance began this series of global speaker series talks in 2020 as a way of engaging Tulsans virtually with the international community during a time of social distancing. International engagement and cooperation, as we've seen, has never been more vital. And we hope that you'll see the lasting good that comes from international exchange programs. TGA is recording today's talk and will share it on TGA's social media later. Tulsa Global Alliance builds global community by working with the city of Tulsa to manage exchanges and activities for Tulsa and its 8 international sister cities. TGA also hosts participants in the US State Department's International Visitor Leadership Program and promotes international business and global education. In 2021, TGA hosted 118 international visitors virtually, representing 58 countries. In 2019, Tulsa Global Alliance, in cooperation with our Washington, D.C.-based partner, World Learning, and with funding from the U.S. State Department Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, hosted a group of almost 20 emerging leaders from Ireland and Northern Ireland. This group was focused on education and programs for youth and met with several Tulsa organizations.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, Bob. Let's give him a minute and see if he comes back. Maybe I should type in the chat that we can't.
Based on the wonderful experiences that the international visitors had when in honor of St. Patrick's Day this month, TGA has invited Emily and David to be with us today to share their experiences on this trip and the friendships created by their exchange. TGA and the Global Ties US network often talk about the concept of citizen diplomacy, the idea that all citizens have the right and responsibility to help shape international relations, one handshake and one friendship at a time. Emily and David represent this ideal very well, and they have a slide presentation about their visit and are happy to take questions during the presentation. So if you have a question, just raise your hand or type something in the chat. Emily, David, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. I think most were on here when we were just warming up and chatting, but we were talking about how December 2019 is when we went on this trip, and we really didn't know a whole lot about what was going to happen in the world. And we got our international travel in right under the wire.
Right.
So
it was pre-Brexit, I think, and a lot of stuff was going on.
That's right. That's right. Strange timing. So, all right. Well, I'm going to screen share our presentation, and David and I are just going to kind of tag team walking you through what the experience was like for us, and maybe some of the things that we learned and takeaways. And then, as Bob said, if you have any questions, just type it in the chat or feel free to unmute and chime in. Good. All right. David, would you like to go first?
Sure, Emily. So in 2019, Emily and I were invited to participate in an exchange to Ireland and Northern Ireland. What was pretty neat about this experience is that the 20 folks who came from there chose us to come see them and talk about the programs that we do here in Tulsa.
All right. Well, we started, we flew it straight into Dublin, and that evening just had some time with our team to explore. There were representatives, there was a contingent of professionals that came from St. Paul, Minnesota, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, I believe. Can you think of a couple of the other places, David?
Yeah, most of them were from the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, but I do remember that there was one person from Philadelphia that I recall.
Mm-hmm. And all the thing that we all had in common really was that we had been visited by the contingent that came from Northern Ireland, and we all worked in the area of youth development or nonprofit. So we spent that first evening exploring the city, and then we went to a welcome embassy or welcome reception at the U.S. Embassy, which was just a really neat experience. I had never been inside an embassy on that side of the ocean. So that was just a great welcome reception and just a time of getting to know each other. And I would say that by the end of the trip, this group we were pretty tight. It was fun. So
the only thing that struck me about the embassy was it was probably one of the ugliest buildings I'd ever seen. Remember, it was round. There was security around it. It was in Dublin, pretty close to the hotel, so we walked over there. It was really great hearing the perspective of the diplomats and how they had worked or continue to work with both Ireland and Northern Ireland.
Yes, I think that was a huge piece of, we'll talk much more about that, but that was a huge learning aspect for me, broadening my worldview. I am about to be 36, so I am a child of the 90s. And so I had never viewed the tension, the conflict, the troubles, all that has happened between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland through adult eyes. So that I'll circle back to that, but definitely a big takeaway for me. Our first stop the next day was we began kind of a tour of visiting the sites of the alumnus of the program, alumni of the program. So just like they came to Tulsa and went to youth services, attended a youth philanthropy initiative meeting, just like they got to see what we do, we began our tour to learn about what they do. So I would say that was kind of the theme. It was a learning tour. The first place we stopped was the Ulster Gaelic Games and Activities Center. And this is an organization that I believe is the largest sporting organization in Northern Ireland. And it's incredibly volunteer run. It's a huge sporting and arts organization where they're bringing in people from the community, and it's almost all community led. And that was a great, this is just kind of from our meeting. One thing I'll note is that if you think about time zones and where Ireland is, it was December. So it was dark a lot of the time. You'll see that in our photos. 4 p.m., the sun was set for the day. So I'm just seeing the darkness of this room is reminding me of that. But this was just our first learning spot. Do you have any other takeaways on that, David?
Yeah, I think what was really neat about this organization is their sole mission seemed to be to connect young people with the history of the Gaelic games. So it wasn't like they were playing American soccer or football. They were playing games that Emily and I and the group had never heard of, that were connected to the Gaelic culture.
Yes, yeah. And they're very proud of that, very proud.
And I have no idea how to pronounce those games, nor do I remember what they are.
Nope. I'm David, I don't know this photo.
Yeah, that was just taken as we were getting out of the van and stretching our legs. It was a church that was under reconstruction, and it was pretty, so I took a picture of it.
Yeah. Beautiful country. Okay, our next stop was, I would say, in a more rural part of Northern Ireland. It was the Oasis Youth Portadown organization. And this, we went to a couple of sites similar to this. And it seems to me that the model was in these more rural communities, the youth centers were sort of a hub to bring in students from kind of diverse backgrounds, maybe different home environments, different schools even, and also from different ethnic backgrounds. One of the Connor was his name. He started some youth clubs through through these organizations and talked a lot about how in the rural parts of Northern Ireland, there were actually quite a few immigrants, and these youth hubs could be a place to bring those students together and build relationships, and just to also a safe place for them to have fun. It really, if you've ever participated or have kids who've participated in a youth group or some kind of like sports club, it really functioned like that. It seemed even when we visited, there were students there just hanging out after school. So this is at one of the clubs, and you can see on the far left of the photo are Connor, and then the other some youth workers. Connor is one of the alumni of the program, so he actually had been to Tulsa before.
Yeah, one of the things that I remembered about that program was that they talked about that Ireland had not had a history of immigration. They had a history of immigration out to the United States and other countries, but it was kind of a new thing for them to get immigrants from Eastern Europe and Turkey. And so a lot of this was really trying to acculturate folks on Irish norms and customs, as well as connect them with resources. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of a new thing for them, is having immigrants come to the Republic of Ireland due to the economic environment there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, this is going to be a fun one to talk about. This was a memorable part of the trip for me. You're looking at a picture of the Stormont. That's what it's colloquially, it's just called the Stormont. It's the Parliament building in Northern Ireland, and this is where the Northern Ireland Assembly actually meets. And it was established in 1998 through the Good Friday Agreement, if you're up on your Northern Ireland history. It's a beautiful building. We heard all kinds of fun stories about how this building had functioned over the last 100 years, including, I think, a story about how it was covered in grass during World War II. Our tour guide was just incredibly knowledgeable. So we went on an actual structure tour. This is the inside of the Parliament building, and there's our team, and then some more of the folks that were alumni of the program. I'll click through to this section here and hand it over to you, David, if you have any thoughts, reflections on this tour.
They highlighted I believe it was either Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton. Do you remember which?
It was Hillary, and you can see are you going to talk about the carpet?
Yeah, tell them about that.
Well, in this photo with the blue carpet, in the center, it's very faint, but you can see where it looks like maybe a little square has been cut out of the carpet. And the story the tour guide told was that it had something to do with Hillary Clinton at the time that she was serving as Secretary of State came over, and there was like a concern about her tripping over a microphone cord. And so they cut that hole in the carpet specifically for Hillary. That's what I remember of the story. Am I remembering that correctly?
And they had quite fond memories of both Hillary and Bill Clinton because of Friday Accords, when peace kind of was established between Northern Ireland and the Republic.
Yeah. As you can see, it's a really beautiful building. I think that there is, just as one of our big, one of the takeaways is just that sense of pride that the people of Northern Ireland have about what they've accomplished and how they're functioning. So, and a great segue to that is this is Rachel Wood, again, an alumni. She came to Tulsa. She's actually a member of the Parliament and was recently elected almost just like weeks before we arrived.
Actually, yeah, she was elected when she was here.
Oh, that's right. That's right. She found out while she was in Tulsa. Yes.
Yeah, she was in a presentation here at Youth Services, and I was talking, and I thought that the group was excited about something I had said, and it was early morning, I couldn't figure it out, but they had just discovered that she had been elected to Parliament, and that was kind of the neat thing about that.
Yeah. She was a very dynamic person and an excellent host also. She took us to a local bar that she also worked at, and very dynamic person. So she would be someone to watch, I think. right. Would you like to talk about this a little bit, David?
Yeah, I think this was a meeting with Michaela. Well, that's her name, right? Michaela.
Mhm.
And she's an advocate that helped push through some measures for accessibility around toilets for people with disabilities. So a very dynamic individual. She worked hard with the parliament there, and she was giving us a tour of one of these facilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're called Changing Places toilets, and Michaela's work is trying to expand that throughout Northern Ireland. So starting, this is within the Stormont building. So they were very proud of this accomplishment of having it there in the Parliament building. It's a large room, and it's specifically geared toward individuals that have more profound disabilities and need a larger space so that any equipment and maybe their caregiver can all be in the room comfortably together. So she was a very dynamic person. She came with us on a lot of our tours. Later that day, we headed over to just a local hotel, and this was our time of sort of teaching and learning. This was an opportunity where David and I both gave a presentation. The other members of our group gave a presentation to the alumni, but also to other individuals that maybe work with them or are in the field of youth development. And so just an opportunity for us to kind of give back and talk about what we do. And it set up in motion other like individual meetings. I know I had a couple of other like one-off meetings with folks that were curious about how the program that I work with functions, and just a great opportunity for cross-cultural learning there.
Yeah, absolutely. This was in my opinion, one of the highlights of our opportunity or visit there. We were able to volunteer within St. Patrick's Soup Kitchen for an evening, serving meals to homeless folks in that community, and really kind of having some good conversations with those folks who both work there and volunteer there. So this is a picture after we had worked our shift, after we had fed lots of folks. I believe there were Christmas presents given out that evening to some young people. But it was fun to talk to people about the work that they do, the challenges that they see, and some of their perspectives. I remember visiting with a guy named John, I believe is his name, and he was kind of in charge of running that soup kitchen during the evening, making sure that the gifts and the clothing and food got to the people that needed it. But he had a perspective about growing up in Belfast that I found really interesting. I'm a little bit older than Emily, so I remember the Troubles quite well. And I have Irish ancestors. My grandmother on my mom's side was Irish, so there was lots of talk about those conflicts over there. But John would talk about how under the rule of the military, that there were fewer social problems in his perspective, less homelessness, less drug addiction, and those type of things. While he wasn't advocating for that, but he did talk about that bringing Northern Ireland into the modern day, if you will, as part of the UK has created some challenges around substance abuse and those type of things. And we certainly saw that in the soup kitchen.
Definitely, definitely. And if you'll notice the gentleman in the middle, in the white Oxford, we have a photo with him later. He's the mayor of Belfast. And then a couple gentlemen to the left of him is Paul, who is a city councilman for the city and one of the alumni. So I think it was a coincidence that the mayor came by, but it was a neat opportunity for us to get to meet him and talk with him a little bit about what was happening within the city. So some of the other photos you saw were, in the more rural areas, like we mentioned, but this would be, I would say, kind of in the heart of the city of Belfast. We also got to have some fun on our trip. All of it was fun, but we did some tourist activities. So the next few photos are just a morning that we spent on the northern coast, heading up toward the Giant's Causeway. So just, as you can imagine, just an incredibly beautiful country. This is the Giant's Causeway. You can see the incredible rock formations there. I knew about the Giant's Causeway because I have a 7-year-old daughter who happened to be fascinated with a story about Giant's Causeway right before I went on this trip. So this was fun to get to send her back a photo of me standing on the Giant's Causeway. And these geological formations are I believe, like a result of underwater volcanic like fissures or eruptions. So they don't look natural, if that makes it like, you think they look very man-made, but yet they're so organic. So just a really beautiful day and experience.
Yeah, that was really interesting to look at. I guess they're columns of basalt, and what was the story again, Emily? Was it two giants?
The folklore around it is that the causeway was some kind of stepping stone path between a Scottish giant and an Irish giant. And so in this photo, this is looking from where we were standing. You can actually look north across the bay there and see Scotland.
Yeah. It's like within 10 miles, I think, or something along those lines.
Yeah. So this is a castle that was just worth noting. Was just incredible that it was built between, they believe, the 15th and 17th centuries. And I think its claim to fame is that it was filmed in a show I have on Game of Thrones, which is a like famous HBO show. So they have like Game of Thrones tours you can go on if you're, if that's your thing. Yeah. Would you like to talk about this one a little, David?
Yeah, I vaguely remember that one. It was a morning and we went to visit the University of Atypical, and it was a nonprofit that really focused on using the arts to work with disabled youth. So we were able to visit with those program folks and look at some of the art that was on display that young people who they worked with had engaged in and created.
Yeah, they had an art show going on at the time, and this Michaela, who we talked about earlier with the Changing Places advocacy work, is also very involved in the University of Atypical. So, the Hub Community Resource Center. This is a funny picture. Gentleman, I don't recall his name, but that runs the Hub Community Resource Center, and this was in another part of the city. One of the things that we were learning as we were going through was more and more about the city's divisions based on Catholic and Protestant associations. And I would say one of my memories of the Hub Community Resource Centers, this was a largely UK-centric part of the city. Once we got to that part of the city, we started seeing the Queen's picture, British flags, and it was a distinct change from some of the other parts of Belfast that we had been in. But this community center functioned very similarly to the Portadown Community Center. Some of the other places that we went to, they had some innovative ways they were approaching helping families with childcare. That was one of my takeaways. They had built in some just community-based childcare to help working mothers, and some other cool social enterprise elements to what they were doing. So do you have any other thoughts, David?
We got to have lunch in this little spot here, and this is their social enterprise. It's a restaurant that they run to help support some of their community development activities. For me, I thought it was kind of funny. At the time that I was visiting, one of my sons had recently graduated from the University of Arkansas, and one of my sons was enrolled in the University of Arkansas. So I had mentioned that to the guy as he was wearing his Arkansas athletic shirt, and he had no idea where Arkansas was or anything. The University of Arkansas and the Razorbacks. For me, that the part that really stuck out in my mind was that this man was about my age. And he had some pretty vivid memories and strong feelings still about the Troubles. He talked about some anger and resentment regarding how the IRA, in his opinion, was funded through American dollars, and that in his view was terrorism. So it was interesting to hear that perspective, and to know that folks in his generation were still holding on to some of those hard feelings and working through them through the young people in their lives. I believe his daughter was one of the attendees here in Tulsa and the US, and had a very different perspective than him, and talked about him being old school and needing to get up with the times.
The next few slides will show you some photos on, we went on what was called a black taxi tour. So we went on a tour just to see some of the murals, memorials, and significant sites related to the Troubles specifically. So what you're looking at in this photo is a wall, is the remnants of the wall that during that time separated the Protestant and Catholic neighborhoods. And if you kind of look at how high up they go in some parts, but the gentlemen that led us on these tours, I would say, were very, similar in age and experience from the man that David was just speaking about, where they were not sharing they were sharing historical information, but they were sharing historical information that was fresh and real and from personal experience for them. It was incredibly compelling. And so you can see on the wall that there are, people have signed their names. People have, there's an art mural. So this was on the left side, this photo, it says wall on wall. And it was a beautiful art installation that was photos of other walls all over the world. Really sobering. It's got all the different countries listed on there, where there's a wall separating communities. So just a really compelling thing. And then this photo on the right, I was looking through old folders and remember that I did that. So you can see my name. I've signed my name in purple here, Emily Curzon, on the wall. And I think people are, signing the wall as a way to say, like, we want peace. It's just a gesture of peace. And now that we see what those walls, the division that those walls physically and otherwise represent.
Yeah, and you'll note that number 4 on that was the US wall between us and Mexico. So we were listed on there, and it gave us an opportunity to talk about our feelings and thoughts around that with some of the folks we were with.
Yeah. The tour kind of went on. There are these beautiful murals all over the city, depending on, commemorating different sides, really. So this is a very famous IRA member, Bobby Sands, who died in prison during a hunger strike. If you're not familiar with him, if you Google him, there's so much information about him. And I just remember standing here with the gentleman, telling quite the whole story of who Bobby Sands was. And he was a very young man when he died, incredibly passionate man. And so this is, depending on what one of the takeaways is, depending on what side someone might fall on, they may view him as a martyr, or they may view him as a terrorist. So we kind of saw, as I'll click through some of the other photos, the murals that sort of depicted the different sides, all within, a few miles of each other.
And depending on who your tour guide was in the black cab tours, you would get that different perspective too. So it was interesting. It seemed like we were in 2 cabs that day, and one had a very UK perspective or a unionist perspective, and the other had a Republican perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this would be on the Catholic side, so it's similar, but as you can see, it's got the word martyrs there. This is right on the wall. If you look at the top, you can see kind of the fencing at the top of the wall. So this is just on the other side from where we had just been, where the mural was.
And that memorializes what they see as a massacre by the British Army of Catholic citizens on that side of the wall in that neighborhood.
And it is just flat in the middle of a neighborhood. I mean, if you were the person taking this photo to turn around, it's just homes right there. So you can think about that. There are people that still are very much not only are they living with it a fresh memory, but it is in their backyard.
And the neighborhoods are still very much segregated as well in the part of town.
Yeah. This is a Unionist memorial.
Yeah, the other side of the wall.
And here, this is, oh, do you remember the story with this one, David?
Yeah, this was a car bombing. The IRA had set off a car bomb in this neighborhood. And there, I think there was a daycare in that neighborhood, a restaurant, a bar. And so this was really memorializing the violence or the martyrs on the Protestant side as they saw them, and kind of talking about how they viewed the IRA as a terrorist organization. A lot of people died in that.
Later that evening, we went to dinner at the Crumlin Road Goal Event Center, which is what it's called now, but it is actually a former prison and a very famous prison. In fact, it's really location-wise was walking distance from a few of the murals that you saw right there. But what's funny is they hold concerts there. You can have your wedding there if you want to. It's kind of interesting. But our evening there was with both groups. So our group and then the alumni from the group that came to Tulsa, and it was hosted by the U.S. Consul General Elizabeth Kennedy Trudeau. So we just had an opportunity to meet some other folks from in the foundation world there in Northern Ireland. So a really neat opportunity to meet those and mingle with the other folks that have been a part of the program. I'll click through we went on a tour of the prison, so you can see some here. Some very, gallows and, really interesting and, rather creepy, in my opinion, things, but an interesting tour no less. This is a mural inside the cell of at that prison.
Yeah, this was more for political prisoners, is my understanding, than for prisoners, who committed petty crimes or things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I skipped our Titanic photo, I think, or maybe not. I don't know.
I think it's next.
That's okay. It's lagging a bit for me. Okay. The next day, you'll see the man in the middle with the gold necklace on is the mayor, again, of the city of Belfast. And we went to City Hall and had an opportunity to have tea with the mayor. So we had met him previously, if you remember, from the soup kitchen, but kind of got to see him in his element. This was he was just incredibly gracious. So there's a lot of decorum around being the mayor, including they call him the Lord Mayor, and it's in this beautiful large City Hall building. But I found him to be just incredibly casual and real and have quite a history. Growing up in Belfast and being active politically, I believe his father was assassinated or murdered, was a lawyer and associated with the Sinn Féin political party. And you'll notice that above him in the frame is a framed photo of Frederick Douglass. And the mayor, I believe, said he chose that art. And it had roots obviously related to segregation and the integration of the Catholic and Protestant communities there, but just a really neat person. Also someone to watch if you're following politics in that area.
And my understanding is they rotate between the political parties of who holds the Lord Mayor position. So this was the Sinn Féin time for that. And Sinn Féin, if you're not familiar with that, is the political wing of the IRA.
The rest is just some fun touristy things. So if you're up on your Titanic trivia, you'll know that the Titanic was built in Belfast, and the shipping is a big industry in Belfast specifically. And so they have a huge shipyard area where they've built this large museum where you could, it's really dedicated, not really so much to the Titanic, but more to how the Titanic was built and how that industry is a big part of the economy in Belfast.
This one really stuck out at me. This is, I believe it was the next morning, maybe. I don't know. But we were able to take a tour of what they consider an integrated school in Northern Ireland. So these are Catholic and Protestant kids going to school together in a public school setting, developing relationships with young people in different neighborhoods who they didn't know or wouldn't have an opportunity to know. And some of the students would tell us about these friendships that had developed between the students that, were unique because of the school that they attended.
Yeah, this was a very, one of my favorite spots, profound for me when as Americans, when we think of the word integration, we automatically go toward thinking about racial tension and division. And for them, it's framed in a religious context. And so it was really compelling. They had the students took us on a tour of the school, and it's a beautiful, relatively new campus and building. And they shared the history of, when the doors opened the first time, there was security involved, just like we've seen photos of African-American students for the first time being accompanied with armed people to go into a predominantly white school. That was the feeling and the sentiment around when the school opened. To me, it was very similar. That was my my takeaway is, and yet the school seems to really be thriving, which is exciting.
And for me, it reminded me of how Tulsa had integrated schools back in the 70s. I'm a Booker T graduate from 1982, and my siblings and I were some of the first kids to go to school on the north side at Carver in Washington. And it was just neat to see this different version of breaking down those barriers between one part of the community and another part of the community, and the friendships and relationships that come out of that experience.
Yes, absolutely. And it was the holiday season while we were there. So this is just kind of a picture of the building actually that you're looking at there is City Hall. So where you had just seen a photo of us inside with the mayor. This is in front of City Hall where they have a beautiful Christmas market. It's probably about 3 p.m. in this photo. Oh, the oldest pub in Belfast. And of course, when you're in Ireland, you're obligated to have a Guinness or two.
Yes, and they were delicious.
All right. Well, that's the end of our slide presentation, but we just thank you all for listening. It was a wonderful trip. An eye-opening, worldview broadening trip. I'm very grateful for the opportunity. Yeah.
It's been neat. We've carried on some of the relationships with some of the organizations over there. Farage, was that the name of it? Do you remember that one? They were working with juveniles, disadvantaged, at-risk youth, very similar to the work that I do here in Tulsa and Youth Services does, and have been able to share some of the curriculum that we use to divert young people out of the court system. So Sharon and I, we email periodically. She gives me progress, or kind of tells me about how those programs are evolving over there. And it's been really neat to watch and to have those relationships carry on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Emily and David, thank you very much for the presentation and the account of your experience and your trip. Does anyone in our audience have questions? All right, we already have one from Cassie Bailey. This was all great to hear. Could I contact you to connect? We're planning a delegation to Northern Ireland this summer for an international conference.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What would Bob, I'm happy, I mean, we can type our emails here in the chat, or what would be the best way to do that?
Let's see here. Yeah, go ahead and type them into the chat, and I'll save that too in case anybody else would like to have it. And then Mary Alice Algren has raised her hand.
Good morning. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Mary Alice.
Mine is not a question. It's just a comment that I got the opportunity to live in the Republic for a year and a half, 95 to 97. And we were not able to go to the North, as they called it, quote unquote, during that period of time because of the fighting still going on. And whereas we went to a bunch of other countries in Europe, we couldn't go to the North. So it was quite still evident, going on up there, and kind of what you were talking about at the wall. The Irish have very long memories for some of their things that happen. I mean, we were running into people. I met women of all ages, and some of the older women, they're still mad about the potato famine with England and taking, their food. So yeah, they have long memories. My kids did go to a local village school, basically a Catholic school. They were one of, or two of 6 Protestant kids there. And down in the Republic, the Irish Protestant don't have quite the same, or at least then didn't have quite the same animosity with each other. Even though we knew, what was going on up north. One other and then 2 other comments I had. One is that at that point in time, just a few years earlier than, when you guys were around there, they didn't have very much youth development kind of programming going on. My daughters did Girl Guides, which is kind of an equivalent to Girl Scouts. And that was about it. There wasn't a lot of activities or, that kind of thing going on. I had another comment. It's escaped my mind, but anyway, it was a wonderful experience for me, but I loved seeing today your experience just a few years later with the Northern, Ireland. So thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that some of those youth programs that we visited really kind of evolved out of the Troubles, that the community began to see that one way of healing the past trauma and all those type of things was through the kids, and that creating these opportunities through programming and activities was one way to both connect young people with each other, but also to provide a level of healing as well, and some positive future.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I remembered my other comment. I'm curious about what you discovered when I was there. Volunteering at organizations it wasn't a thing. I mean, of course, I came from a nonprofit experience in my life and thought, oh, that'll be great fun to go over and volunteer at an organization in Ireland. And they didn't really know what to do with me. So they were like, we don't really have that. What did y'all discover up in the North?
Well, I mean, what I'll say, I'll mention the Ulster group. That was that first place that we stopped, where they're incredibly volunteer led, but I'd say it was maybe volunteer led is community based is probably more the right term, meaning that, and with the youth centers and the more rural parts, the folks that were there were the people that lived there. We went to like a Christmas Eve dinner at one of the places, and you could tell everyone knew each other, everyone lived in the neighborhood, and they were all pouring into this together. So that's the kind of volunteering that I observed. Maybe that looks different perhaps from here, where we might just find an organization that aligns with our values and try to plug in. It seemed like this was more community, but this is the neighborhood that I live in and I'm going to work in as well. And I know that Connor, who I mentioned, he was a youth worker. That was the term he used, but they actually received a salary from the government for that.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I heard too from folks, is that a lot of the funding came from government resources, with the exception of St. Patrick's Soup. I think that was completely volunteer run and supported by the neighborhood in that church, if I remember right. And so they were taking in donations and sorting through donations while we were volunteering there, and it seemed like that was quite the volunteer opportunity for people.
Yeah.
For people of all ages volunteering that night.
I might ask one question myself. I think one of you mentioned that this was an experience that was something that changed your mindset or worldview. Can you think of one thing or one way in which this trip might have changed a mindset or an idea that you might have had about that region?
You know, there were lots of things about that trip that made me think. You know, just the 2 years after that trip and the fact that we were with a group from Minneapolis who were talking about, this was before the George Floyd killing, but there had been a couple of other interactions with police and the community that those folks were talking about, that they had gone to school with Castile, a man who had been shot in a car, a cafeteria worker, and they were working on healing their own divisions within their community in Minneapolis. And you know, we experienced that too a couple of summers ago. And last summer, as we dealt with the 100-year anniversary of our massacre here in Black Wall Street. So to me, it offered hope in that these community trauma bonds between different groups of people can be healed over time, but it takes relationships, and it takes relationships between individuals to move that forward. But that was the big takeaway for me, is that number one, the Irish participants who had come to the United States had created relationships within that group that helped kind of navigate that border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. And so that was kind of neat to see and hear them talk about those relationships that they had developed on the trip, and just the activities that the communities were doing to try and heal their past.
Yeah. Oh, David, that was beautifully said. I don't know if I can top that. But I would say, you know, just, I think we can all identify with, we get stuck in our own small corner of the universe. You know, I think about what my organization, Youth Philanthropy Initiative, is doing, and I think about the students just here in Tulsa. And I think, man, sometimes I'll think we're doing really great work, right? This is really great. This is compelling. I think what, and I believe that's true, but I think it, in a sense, I'm not sure if humbling is the right word, but it was encouraging and challenging and humbling to see that philanthropy is happening all over the world. And you know, the word philanthropy means love of mankind, and that's, you know, what we're teaching our students in our program, but that's also what's being taught in Portadown, Northern Ireland. That's also what those youth workers and the volunteers at the soup kitchen in Belfast are. That's the value, those are the same values that they hold, and that motivate them in their personal and professional lives. And so that was encouraging and challenging. Makes me want to dig in and do more of that here. So.
And Grant Moak has raised his hand.
Yes, excuse me. You already answered one of my questions I was going to ask. I apologize. And that was whether you had any Guinness on tap while you were there.
Delicious.
That was at the end. So I would follow that up with, how did the Guinness on tap taste in comparison to the bottled Guinness we get here? And I've got a second question. Was Brexit ever a topic of conversation while you were there?
It was a huge topic of conversation, and there was some level of anxiety about how Brexit and who would be elected Prime Minister of the UK would affect the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. We were there when there was no real border. You didn't really know, unless you're looking at a sign, whether you were in Northern Ireland or you were back in the Republic. And so there was a lot of concern about that. This was critical to maintaining the peace, that if there was a border and customs back in place between Northern Ireland and the Republic, that would not only affect their economy, but it would also affect the relationships that they were establishing and the healing path that they were on. You know, it was interesting because after we had left, on the news, and I don't remember what caused that, but there were some troubles that developed around the wall, and there was some rioting that had taken place. But I think the difference was because they had established some of those relationships and they had begun that healing path, that didn't turn into a huge thing. It lasted maybe a couple of days and then it was resolved. As for your Guinness question, there is nothing better than a Guinness on tap. And I came back to report that to my board president at the time, Meg Nelson, whose husband and her run the McNally's Group restaurants. And I talked about how delicious Guinness was in Ireland and how I felt like there might have been a difference. And she got a little defensive about that and informed me that the folks from the brewery in Dublin had visited McNally's and had given them the 4 stars or whatever the rating was, that their Guinness on tap is as good as the Irish Guinness on tap.
But you know, experience is part of what makes it good too, you know, atmosphere,
conversation,
that's right.
people.
I'll throw in there that the big topic of debate when I was there in the mid 90s was about divorce, and they actually did vote to allow divorce. So imagine how late, and you know, in our experience, that occurred, and obviously related to the religious differences. Because but that was a big deal that women were finally able to divorce husbands that they felt the need to.
And I don't know if you noticed this, Emily, but it felt like that when you were in the Republic in Dublin, you were in kind of a little bit of a time warp, that things were a little older, they were a little simpler. And then when you got into Belfast, it was more of a modern city in my view. And, you know, even accommodations we stayed in were different. We stayed, I think, in a Holiday Inn in Belfast, in the middle of Belfast, with all the modern conveniences that you would have in the States. Whereas the hotel that we stayed in Dublin, at least on the first couple of days, by the embassy, was very dated, and they even had, and I haven't seen this in a long time, but do you guys remember instant coffee, where you hot water and have like coffee? So that was really a thing there, and I was just really shocked by that.
Or even just the stereotypes that we have, or things that we associate with Irish, meaning St. Patrick's Day, 4-leaf clover, the color green. It was a very noticeable difference that once you went to Northern Ireland, that was really not around much. It was very, very specifically in Dublin, and then that was really it.
And then, you know, in those evenings at the pubs, when we would visit with the folks who were the alumnus, it was interesting hearing their perspectives, because some of them grew up very much believing in viewing Northern Ireland as part of the UK, while others saw it as, as rightfully part of the Republic and return. So it was just fascinating to hear their perspectives on that as well.
And the people that I knew down, and I was down in Limerick, so I was pretty far south. They like what you mentioned about the traditions and, the old ways and keeping things old. That's the way they wanted it.
Yep.
They didn't, and that's part of the big separation, because they didn't want the newness. Some didn't want the newness that association with England would bring.
Right.
It was fascinating to me. Another thing is, you were talking about the religious divide, because it's so much more. We hear it's just Christianity, Protestant, but it's not. It's so much more. It's economic, really, more than religion. But the two religions don't know the tenets of each other. They don't, when I walked with some ladies and they had no idea what I believed as a Protestant. So there's not, you can't, unless you're educated about each other, you can't come across a divide.
Yeah, and there really aren't opportunities for that education.
Right.
Because the neighborhoods were so segregated, because the school systems were segregated. And that integrated school that we visited was like a new idea of bringing folks from different neighborhoods, different backgrounds, different religions together to be educated together. It was just a new thing for them, and it was working very well.
Well, David and Emily, we thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. And thank you for demonstrating the lasting power of citizen diplomacy and for representing Tulsa and Oklahoma so well on the world stage. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the
Happy
opportunity.
to do it.
I'll make a brief plug because we're going to have another global speaker series on Wednesday, April the 13th at the same time, 9:30 a.m. And this is from a current international visitor who will be coming to us virtually. She's a very special visitor, a program the State Department is doing called the International Women of Courage Program. And our visitor is Josefina Klinger-Zuniga, who is an advocate for environmental justice and indigenous rights in Colombia. So we'll be putting out an announcement about that, but if you're interested, please mark your calendars. And if you enjoyed and learned something from today's presentation, as I did, I learned a lot from what you both had to share, please follow Tulsa Global Alliance on our social media or sign up on our website for our electronic newsletter. And thanks again, Emily and David, and thanks for everyone who joined us today. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Emily.
You too. Bye.